20 world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, have arrived in China for a major security summit. The leaders of North Korea and Iran are also in attendance. This meeting comes as the United States continues to implement punitive tariffs, frustrating long-term economic partners and allies.
What we are witnessing right now is something that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Countries that have been rivals for decades are suddenly sitting at the same table, shaking hands and making plans together. And it's all because of one simple truth. When you attack everyone at once, you give them a really good reason to become friends. On September 3rd, 2025, the city of Tianjin in China hosted something that made American foreign policy experts very uncomfortable. Leaders from China, Russia, India, and Iran all gathered for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. But this wasn't just another boring diplomatic meeting.
All eyes on Shanghai at the moment, and in previous instances, this has been referred to as the League of Authoritarian Gentlemen or a dictators club. But it's somewhat upended now, isn't it, when you see people like Narendra Modi attending too? What do you make of his attendance?
Well, there's a lot of bad news here, very little good news. The West has spent decades, U.S. in particular, trying to wean India away from its Cold War attachment to Soviet Union, Russia, buying sophisticated weapons from them. And cautioning India on the danger posed by China. This is symbolized by what's called the Asian Security Quad: Japan, India, Australia, and the United States. A lot of effort to make India more amenable to cooperation with these countries. Donald Trump in the past weeks has essentially upended that, and for a variety of reasons now sent India back toward Russia to grow closer to China, and just shredding these decades of efforts to try and change that alignment. I'm not saying this can't be fixed, but it's going to take a lot of work, and I don't see it starting anytime soon.
6 months ago, we would have talked about the bromance between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi of India.
This was the moment when America's decades-old strategy of divide and conquer completely fell apart. The most shocking moment, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was supposed to be America's best friend in Asia, was caught on camera laughing and joking with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. They looked like old buddies at a reunion, not leaders of countries that are supposed to be rivals. For years, the United States had a simple game plan: keep these big countries fighting with each other so they would never team up against America. It worked pretty well too. China and India had border disputes. Russia and China competed for influence. Iran was isolated from everyone. But then Donald Trump came back to the White House with a new approach: hit everyone with massive tariffs all at the same time. Trump slapped a crushing 50% tariff on India, claiming it was punishment for buying cheap Russian oil. He did the same thing to Brazil and ramped up tariffs on China. His logic was simple: force these countries to buy more American products by making their exports to America more expensive. What Trump didn't expect was that these countries would stop fighting each other and start working together instead. India's Modi, who was used to be called the most pro-American leader in India's history, suddenly decided to take his first trip to China in 7 years. When he got there, he didn't just attend boring meetings. He posted photos on social media showing himself having friendly conversation with Xi Jinping and Putin. The message was clear. India has other options if America wants to play hardball. The results of this summit were even more significant than the photos. These countries didn't just agree to friends. They created real alternatives to American dominated institutions. China proposed something called the SCO Development Bank, and everyone said yes. This new bank will lend money to member countries using their own currencies instead of using dollars. That might sound boring, but it's actually a huge deal. For decades, countries had to use American dollars for most international businesses, which gave the United States enormous power over the global economy. Iran's president went even further. He laid out a detailed plan for what he called de-dollarization, basically finding ways to do business without using American money at all. His plan included three main ideas: trade using local currencies, create digital payment systems that bypass American banks, and set up a special fund to help countries that get hit with American sanctions. The Iranian leader put it simply: countries must reduce their dependence on the dollar. This is exactly what American officials have been worried about for years. When countries stop using dollars for trade, America loses a massive source of power. Right now, if you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia or trade with most countries, you need American dollars. That means everyone has to play by American rules. But what if they didn't have to anymore? The numbers behind this alliance are staggering. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization now represents more than 40% of the world's population.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization has grown into a significant force in promoting a new type of international relations and building a community with a shared future for humanity. At this summit, we are tasked with an important mission to build consensus among all parties, ignite momentum for cooperation, and draw up a blueprint for development.
When you look at the biggest economies by actual purchasing power, three of the top five, China, India, and Russia, are now working together. Combined, they represent about one third of the entire global economy. Even more telling is what these leaders said at the summit. Xi Jinping didn't mince words when he talked about global governance reaching a new crossroads. He said countries need to oppose what he called hegemonism and power politics, diplomatic language that everyone understood meant the United States. Xi's vision was clear. He wants a world where all countries have an equal say, regardless of their size or wealth. He said the house rules of a few countries must not be imposed on others. Putin echoed these themes, talking about creating genuine multilateralism and building new systems of stability and security. For Putin, this summit was proof that Russia isn't as isolated as the West hoped. Despite years of sanctions, he was standing shoulder to shoulder with leaders representing billions of people. Modi's participation was particularly significant because it showed how much America's approach has backfired. Just 6 months earlier, people were talking about the bromance between Trump and Modi. The two countries were supposedly natural partners in containing China's rise, but Trump's tariffs changed everything. Modi found himself caught between American demands and Indian interests. When America started treating India like an enemy instead of a friend, Modi had to look for other options. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. When Modi shared a car ride with Putin at the summit, Russian media made sure to film every moment. Modi later posted that conversations with Putin are always insightful. This is the same Modi who was supposed to help America isolate Russia. American foreign policy experts are not happy about these developments. John Bolton, who served as Trump's national security advisor, called it a disaster. Bolton said the United States had spent decades trying to pull India away from Russia and closer to America, that Trump had essentially appended all that work in just a few weeks. Jake Sullivan, who was Biden's national security advisor, said something similar. He noted that countries around the world are now de risking from the United States because they see America as unreliable. Sullivan said opinion polls now show China is more popular than America in many countries, something that wasn't true just a year ago. This shift has real consequences beyond just diplomatic photo ops. China and India signed agreements to resolve their border disputes that had been creating tensions for years. Russia is acting as a mediator between the two Asian giants, helping bring them together, while America's aggressive approach is pushing them apart. Economic cooperation is expanding rapidly too. Trading between SCO countries has already surpassed $2.3 trillion, and much of it is happening without American dollars. The physical infrastructure connecting these countries is growing as well, with nearly 14,000 kilometers of international transport routes now connecting SCO member states. What makes this particularly challenging for the United States is that these are not just authoritarian countries ganging up against democracy. India is the world's largest democracy. Many SEO members have democratic governments or are important American partners in other contexts. The alliance also includes major energy producers like Russia and Iran, technological powerhouses like China, and massive consumer markets like India. When these countries start coordinating their policies, they can offer each other alternatives to American products, American technology, and American financial systems. China has even announced it's willing to share artificial intelligence technology with other SCO members, creating an open source approach that contrasts sharply with American tech companies' attempts to maintain monopolies. The timing of all this couldn't be worse for American interests. Just as the United States is trying to maintain its global leadership, it's facing challenges on multiple fronts. Trump's tariff war is creating enemies instead of compliance. America's reputation for reliability is declining. And now, the world's largest countries are actively building alternatives to American led institutions. Perhaps most importantly, these countries are offering a different vision of how the world would work. Instead of one superpower calling the shots, they are proposing a system where multiple centers of power share influence. Instead of everyone following American rules, they want international law and United Nations principles to guide global affairs. The leaders at the SEO summit didn't just criticize the current system, they started building a replacement. They approved the new development bank, committed to expanding trade in local currencies, and laid out plans for reforming international institutions like the United Nations and the World Bank to give developing countries more say. Whether this new alliance will last remains to be seen. China and India still have plenty of disagreements. Russia's war in Ukraine creates complications. Iran faces its own challenges. America's strategy of using economic pressure to force compliance has created the opposite result. Instead of countries lining up to follow American leadership, they are lining up to create alternatives to it. The question now is whether this represents a temporary reaction to Trump's policies or a permanent shift in how global power works.
Of NVIDIA's H20. The H20 is the China-specific chip that had performance engineered out of it that was subject to export control.
Something remarkable happened last month, and it shook the tech world to its core. China, the world's second largest economy, told America's most valuable chip maker, "Take your AI hardware and walk away." That company is NVIDIA, the undisputed king of artificial intelligence, the maker of processors that power everything from chatbots to supercomputers. And here's the twist, this wasn't just about business, this wasn't about money, it was about pride, it was about respect, it was about power. And it started with one man, Howard Lutnick, America's Commerce Secretary. In July, he went on live television and he said something Beijing could not ignore.
And that's key. So we try to play that balance. We don't sell them our best stuff, not our second best stuff, not even our third best. I think fourth best is where we've come out that we're cool.
And then he went further. He said America's goal was to get Chinese developers addicted to American technology. Addicted, like a drug. Think about that for a second. Imagine you are a global superpower and your rival is telling you, you only get our leftovers. We want you hooked on our scraps. For Beijing, that was more than policy, that was humiliation. And humiliation has consequences. Within days, China struck back, not with missiles, not with sanctions, not with regulation, and with coordination. Powerful agencies moved as one. The Cyberspace Administration, the Ministry of Industry, other state regulators, they called in China's tech giants, Alibaba, ByteDance, Tencent, Baidu. These companies are the lifeblood of China's digital economy. They run the platforms used by hundreds of millions. They power cloud services, apps, AI labs, and the message they heard was clear. Stop buying American chips. Find Chinese alternatives. Some firms were told to suspend NVIDIA orders completely. Others had to justify every single purchase. Why use US technology at all when China has its own? At the heart of this storm is one product, the NVIDIA H20 chip. Here's the irony, the H20 is not NVIDIA's crown jewel. It's not the Blackwell, not the A100, not the H100. It is deliberately weakened version, stripped down, designed specifically for China, powerful enough to be useful, but weak enough to comply with US export bans. In other words, a compromise, a middle ground, a way for Nvidia to keep doing business in China without angering Washington. And it worked, at least for a while. Chinese companies bought these chips in massive numbers, hundreds of thousands of units, orders worth billions. China accounts for 13% of Nvidia's global revenue. That's around $17 billion a year. 17 billion, not exactly pocket change. So when Beijing turned against the H20, this wasn't symbolic. This was financial warfare. Chinese regulators raised security alarms. They claimed the H20 might have backdoors, secret entry points, even remote shutdown features. In other words, chips that could let the US spy on Chinese systems, or worse, shut them down in a crisis. Nvidia denied it all, called the claims fiction, said there were no backdoors, no hidden kill switches. But in geopolitics, truth doesn't always matter. What matters is perception. What matters is power. And China was sending a message, loud and clear. We will not be treated as a second class partner. So here's the big question: can China actually replace US chips? That's the battlefield now. Not missiles, not tanks, but silicon. China has been preparing for this moment. Companies like Huawei, like Cambricon, they have been developing their own AI processors for years. Huawei's Ascent series is the flagship, their best shot at competing with Nvidia. And while these chips are impressive, they still lag behind in the raw power. When it comes to building giant AI models, every ounce of performance matters. It's the difference between training an AI in 2 weeks or in 2 months. Think of it like cars, a sports car versus a family sedan. Both will get you from A to B, but one does it faster, smoother, with power to spare. That gap is still real. And there's another problem. Even if Chinese chips match US performance, production is the bottleneck. China does not yet have enough factories, not enough advanced foundries, not enough machines to mass produce cutting edge chips. And the machines they need: extreme ultraviolet lithography, etching devices built by companies like ASML in Netherlands. America has been blocking those sales. Hard, no machines, no advanced factories, no scale. That is China's Achilles heel. This leaves Chinese tech companies in a painful bind. Option 1: stick with Nvidia chips, face pressure from regulators, be seen as unpatriotic. Option 2: switch to Chinese chips, sacrifice performance, risk falling behind in the global AI race. Neither option is good, and that is the trap of this new tech Cold War. But step back, this is not just about chips. This is about dominance, about who sets the rules for the digital age. For decades, technology was global, shared, interconnected. Apple designed in California, manufactured in China, sold worldwide. Both America and China now treat technology as national security. America wants to preserve its lead. China wants to end its dependence. And when two superpowers want opposite things, conflict is inevitable. This is the tech Cold War. Nations everywhere are being forced to choose sides. Do you align with America or with China? Neutrality is becoming harder by the day. Trump's administration leaned into this with chip diplomacy, deals with Middle Eastern nations, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. The pitch was simple: we will sell you advanced American chips, but in exchange, you must build your data centers to US standards. Technology for influence, chips for loyalty. Meanwhile, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang is caught in the crossfire. He has spent decades cultivating ties in China. He has called the Chinese market essential. But politics doesn't care about relationships, and the ground beneath Nvidia is shifting. Here's the interesting part. Despite the crackdown, Nvidia stock didn't collapse. Why? Because investors know the H20 is old tech. Nvidia's real profits come from the latest generation, the Blackwell chip, the ones never approved for China anyway. So losing the H20 is painful, but not fatal, at least not yet. But the long term risk is real. If China builds a competitive chip industry, the threat won't just be domestic, it will be global. Imagine cheap Chinese AI chips flooding the market, offered to developing countries, sold to startups, bundled into cloud services. That would challenge American dominance in one of the most strategic industries on earth. And remember, this is not only about business. AI chips are dual use technology. They power economic planning, scientific research, military applications. Whoever controls AI chips controls the future of balance of power. That's why both Washington and Beijing are willing to sacrifice billions today for dominance tomorrow. And what triggered this confrontation? Words, not just restrictions, not just bans, but a public insult. A top US official mocking Chinese capabilities, reducing them to fourth best scraps. Beijing saw it as arrogance, and in geopolitics, arrogance provokes backlash. Looking forward, the clash will only intensify. America is building alliances. China is doubling down on independence. The rest of the world is caught in the middle, trying to stay neutral, trying not to choose. But eventually, every country will face the question: do you build your future on American technology or Chinese alternatives? And here's the bigger question: what does this mean for innovation? On one hand, competition drives progress, two rivals racing to outdo each other. That can accelerate breakthroughs. On the other hand, isolation slows things down. If American and Chinese researchers stop collaborating, global challenges may take longer to solve. Climate change, medical research, artificial intelligence safety, all of it could stall. The chip war is about far more than semiconductors. It's about who sets the rules of the digital age, who writes the future, who controls the next industrial revolution. And right now, both superpowers are willing to endure pain, to sacrifice profits, to gain that edge.